Hi students, welcome to the Step 5 video on past tense where we'll discuss the past perfect tense and the past perfect continuous tense. The past perfect, also called the pluperfect, is a verb tense used to talk about actions that were completed before some point in the past. Now here the formula will be subject plus had, which is an auxiliary verb, plus the V3 and an object. So if you want to take a look at the three forms of verbs, check my step 1 video. So irrespective of the singular subject or the plural subject, which is he, she, it, and I, you, we, they, I will use had with the verb third form and the rest of the words, which is an object. So the first usage is it is talked about a finished action before a second point in the past. For example, when we arrived, the film had started, or it had snowed at night, so the bus didn't arrive. We usually use the past perfect to make it clear which action happened first. Maybe we are already talking about something in the past and we want to mention something else that is further back in time. This is often used to explain or give a reason for something in the past. The second is something that started in the past and continued up to another action or time in the past. The past perfect tells us how long, just like the present perfect, but this time the action continues up to a point in the past rather than the present. For example, when she graduated, she had been in London for 4 years. Or, on the 18th November, I had worked for 3 months in this company. Thirdly, it is used to talk about unreal or imaginary things in the past in the same way that we use the past simple to talk about unreal or imaginary things in the present. We use the past perfect to talk about unreal things in the past. This is common in the third conditional and after wish. For example, she would have passed the exam if she had studied harder. Or, I wish I hadn't gone to bed so late. So let's take a look at the 4 past perfect forms here. Affirmative, which is a sentence, interrogative, a question, negative, and negative interrogative with a question. So starting with the practice of the affirmative, I had met her before the party, you had met her before the party, we had met her before the party, they had met her before the party, she had met him before the party, he had met her before the party. The interrogative, did I make a pizza for you? Did you make a pizza for him? Did we make a pizza for them? Did they make a pizza for them? Had he made a pizza for them? Had she made a pizza for them? Negative, I hadn't fixed the computer, you hadn't fixed the computer, we hadn't fixed the computer, they hadn't fixed the computer, he hadn't fixed the computer, she hadn't fixed the computer. Again, I'm using the contractions here. Instead of had not, I'm saying hadn't. Moving on to the negative interrogatives. Hadn't I played orchestra in the ceremony? Hadn't you played orchestra in the ceremony? Hadn't we played orchestra in the ceremony? Hadn't they played orchestra in the ceremony? Hadn't he played orchestra in the ceremony? Hadn't she played orchestra in the ceremony? So let's do some practice here. Again, write and ask yourself these questions. I had already, If I had, I would have. I recently, when I joined this class, I had never felt so excited before in my life. When? So please answer these questions. I still think typing is more difficult though. So moving on to the past perfect continuous, before we discuss that, it's important for us to discuss the MOT, which is mention of time, which can be either since or for. So what is the difference between the since and for? Since is a specific point of time when that is being discussed. For example, we have the specific point. It can be January to December, Monday to Sunday, specific year, for example 1990, specific time, for example 9 a.m. or p.m., or last weekend or month. On the other hand, for is used for the period of time. So beginning, I can say for 10 seconds, for 10 minutes, for 10 hours, for 10 days, for 10 months, for 10 years, for 10 decades. So the past perfect continuous tense, also known as the past perfect progressive tense, shows that an action that started in the past continued up until another time in the past. The formula will be subject with the had been plus V1, which is the first form of verb with ing and object, and we can use MOT, which is since or for, depending on the sentence. If it is a singular or it is a plural, I will be using had with the been with the verb first form and ing and object. So let's find out the usage. The first one is that something that started in the past and continued up to another action or time in the past. The past perfect continuous tells us how long, just like the present perfect continuous, but this time the action continues up to a point in the past rather than the present. So the first example is we had been living in Switzerland for 4 months when we had to leave. Second, I had been walking for hours when I finally found the house. Second is when something that finished just before another event in the past. This is usually used to show a result at a time in the past. It's very similar to the present perfect continuous, but the action finishes before another time in the past rather than finishing before the present. For example, children had been playing, so the room was a mess. The pavement was wet, it had been raining. Let's do some practice of the affirmatives. I had been gardening for few years. You had been gardening since last year. We had been gardening for few years. They had been gardening since last year. He had been gardening for few years. She had been gardening since last year. Interrogative. Had I been playing tennis for years? Had you been playing tennis since childhood? Had they been playing tennis for years? Had we been playing tennis since childhood? Had he been playing tennis for years? Had she been playing tennis since childhood? Negatives. I had not been painting my bedroom. You had not been painting your bedroom. We had not been painting our bedroom. They had not been painting their bedroom. He hadn't been painting his bedroom. She hadn't been painting her bedroom. Negative interrogative. Hadn't I been taking yoga classes for a month? Hadn't you been taking yoga classes since February? Hadn't we been taking yoga classes for a month? Hadn't they been taking yoga classes since February? Hadn't he been taking yoga classes for a month? Hadn't she been taking yoga classes since February? So let's do the practice. Ask yourself and answer the questions. How long? How long had you been learning English, for example? How long had you been following any TV series, been watching new TV series? Had you been reading your favorite books or newspapers or magazines lately? Had you been following any blogs? Second activity is talk about your previous experiences that ended in the past. It can be related to travel, your work, or holiday. Thank you for watching the video. Keep watching more English grammar videos and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you need more help, send your queries to starlight.shinebr@gmail.com.